They laughed at my ramen-fueled nights and my duct-taped office chair. They called my dream a joke. They said my little startup was a cute hobby, a waste of time, a guaranteed failure. They looked down on me from their shiny skyscraper offices, their expensive suits, their smug faces. 5 years later, I walked into that very same skyscraper, not as a visitor, not as a desperate pitchman, but as the new owner. I bought their entire company. Every single one of them, from the CEO down to the janitor, was now working for me. And the look on their faces when they realized who I was priceless. It was a memory I'll probably savor for the rest of my life. You see, this isn't just a story about getting rich or proving a point. It's about what happens when people stomp all over your biggest dream, and what that does to a person. It's about the fire that kindles inside you, the kind that burns away everything but pure, stubborn ambition. Let me take you back to where it all began, to the day my life changed forever, not with a bang, but with a sneer. It was a scorching hot day in July, kind of heat that makes your shirt stick to your back the moment you step outside. I was 22, fresh out of college, full of big ideas and exactly $0. My startup, Ascend Innovations, was barely a concept. I had a name, a flimsy business plan scribbled on notebook paper, and a prototype app that crashed more often than it worked. The app was simple. It helped small, local businesses connect with customers in a new, hyper-local way. Think Yelp, but for mom-and-pop shops with a community focus. I truly believed it could make a difference, help regular people, and maybe, just maybe, make me enough money to stop eating instant noodles for every meal. That day, I was at a big tech networking event. It was held in one of those fancy downtown hotels, all glass and polished chrome. Everyone there looked like they belonged, like they were born wearing suits and carrying designer briefcases. I, on the other hand, was sweating through my only decent button-down shirt, the one with a barely noticeable coffee stain on the cuff. I felt like an alien. My heart was pounding, a mix of hope and sheer terror. This was my chance, I told myself, my big break. Maybe I'd meet an investor, a mentor, someone who saw the potential in my crazy idea. I somehow managed to snag a moment with a small group of important-looking people. They were from Titan Corp, a massive tech company that had been around forever. They made enterprise software, the kind of stuff big corporations used. They were established, respected, and completely out of my league. But I was naive and I was desperate. I took a deep breath, plastered on my most confident smile, and started my pitch. Hi, I am Alex. I am the founder of Ascend Innovations, I began, my voice a little shaky. I explained my vision, the problem I was trying to solve, the community aspect of my app. I even pulled out my beat-up old phone to show them the buggy prototype. I was so earnest, so full of passion, I could almost taste it. Then came the laughter. It wasn't a friendly chuckle, not a polite smirk. It was a full-bodied, derisive guffaw, kind that makes your cheeks burn and your stomach clench. Ascend Innovations? The tallest guy in the group, a slick-haired dude named Mark, sneered. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my entire year's rent. Sounds like a self-help book for teenagers. What is it, kid? An app that tells you which local coffee shop has the best Wi-Fi for your innovation session. His two buddies, a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair named Sarah, and a skinny guy with a condescending smirk named David, joined in. Sarah pretended to stifle a laugh with her hand, but her eyes were full of scorn. David just shook his head, looking at my phone like it was a relic from another century. No, I tried to explain, my voice barely a whisper now. It's about connecting local businesses, helping them thrive against bigger chains. Imagine a small bookstore or a bakery. Mark cut me off. Kid, you are dreaming. Nobody cares about your little mom and pop shops. It's all about scalability, enterprise solutions, disruption on a global scale. Your little app is a toy. It's cute, I guess, for a school project. He paused, looking me up and down. You really think you are going to compete with companies like ours? With a duct-taped operation and a prototype that probably uses more battery than it delivers value. The mention of duct-taped operation stung. My office chair literally had duct tape holding it together. My office was a corner of my tiny shared apartment living room. He knew somehow. He saw straight through my desperate facade. You should stick to something you are good at, kid, David chimed in, adjusting his glasses. Maybe a paper route. Or something that doesn't involve wasting everyone's time with these fairy tale ideas. They turned away then, dismissing me completely, still chuckling amongst themselves. They moved on to talk to someone else, someone important, someone they deemed worthy of their time. I stood there, rooted to the spot, feeling like I'd just been stripped naked in front of 1,000 people. The heat in the room suddenly felt suffocating. My grand dream, my passion, my everything, had just been reduced to a pathetic joke by 3 people who, frankly, were nobodies in the grand scheme of the tech world. Just middle managers at a big company. To me, in that moment, they were giants, and they had just crushed me. I walked out of that hotel in a daze. The sun was still blazing, but I felt a chilling cold seep into my bones. Shame, anger, and a deep soul-crushing disappointment washed over me. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to quit. I wanted to curl up in a ball and cry until there were no more tears left. All the optimism, all the naive hope I had nurtured for months, evaporated in an instant. As I stumbled down the street, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my best friend, Leah. He was my only real partner in this crazy venture. The brilliant coder who was helping me build the back end of the app, mostly for free, out of sheer loyalty. How'd it go? The text read. I stared at it, unable to type a reply. How could I tell him I'd just been humiliated, that our dream had been laughed out of the room by a bunch of arrogant suits? A bus whizzed by, splashing dirty puddle water on my shoes. I barely noticed. My mind kept replaying Mark's sneering face, Sarah's fake politeness, David's condescending smirk. A toy, Mark had called it. A school project. Those words echoed in my head, a cruel mantra. My throat felt tight, and my eyes started to sting. I hurried back to my apartment, needing to escape, needing to be alone with my shattered dreams. The moment I stepped inside, the tiny, cluttered space felt even smaller, even more pathetic. My duct-taped chair sat there, a silent testament to my humble beginnings, and now my spectacular failure. I sank onto my futon, staring at the ceiling, feeling the full weight of despair. What was I even doing? Was Mark right? Was I just a kid with a naive idea, wasting my time, wasting Liam's time? Maybe I should just give up, get a regular job, forget about this whole startup fantasy. But then, as the initial wave of shame started to recede, something else began to bubble up. A flicker, small at first, then growing into a steady ember. It was anger. A hot, furious anger that slowly started to displace the despair. How dare they? How dare they dismiss me, my idea, my passion, without even truly understanding it? They lived in their corporate bubble, disconnected from the real world, from the struggles of small businesses, from the communities I wanted to help. They had no idea what it took to build something from nothing, to pour your heart and soul into a dream. That anger, mixed with a stubborn defiance, slowly morphed into something even more powerful: determination. A fierce, unshakable resolve. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let their sneers define me. I wouldn't let them extinguish my fire. In that moment, lying on my futon, defeated and humiliated, I made a silent vow. I would build Ascend Innovations into something so big, so undeniable, that they would never be able to laugh at it again. In fact, I swore that one day they would regret every single word they uttered. They would regret it so much that it would break them. The memory of their faces, their laughter, would become my fuel. Every late night, every setback, every ramen meal, every moment of doubt would be countered by the image of Mark's smug smile. They had tried to break me, but instead they had forged something new within me. A steel core of ambition, hardened by humiliation. My tiny startup might have been a joke to them, but I was going to make sure they'd be working for me one day. It sounded insane, I know. It sounded like the fever dream of a humiliated kid. But in that moment, it was the only thing that kept me from truly breaking. The next morning, I woke up with a new clarity. The despair was gone, replaced by a cold, calculated drive. I texted Liam, "Rough day yesterday, but we're not giving up. Not ever. Meet me at the co-working space, 9 a.m. We have a lot of work to do." He replied instantly, "On my way." What's the plan? The plan was simple, though I didn't say it aloud then. The plan was to build an empire. The plan was to make them regret everything. Picking up the pieces after that humiliation was the hardest thing I've ever done. For a few hours, maybe a full day, I was completely broken. You know that feeling when you try to stand up after falling really hard and your legs just don't want to cooperate. That was me emotionally. My mind kept replaying Mark's smirk, Sarah's fake cough laugh, David's dismissive wave. Every time it felt like a fresh punch to the gut. I actually considered deleting the entire app code, just wiping Ascend Innovations off the face of the earth. What was the point? If these big shots, who knew the industry inside and out, thought I was a joke, then maybe I was. But then Liam showed up. He burst into my tiny apartment, looking a bit rumpled, probably having pulled an all-nighter coding. He saw my face, pale and drawn, and his usual cheerful grin faltered. "Hey, what's up? You look like you just saw a ghost." I told him everything. I recounted the whole humiliating experience, the mocking words, the feeling of being utterly worthless. As I spoke, my voice was barely above a whisper, filled with shame. I expected him to agree, to say, "Yeah, maybe they're right, Alex. Maybe this isn't for us." But Liam didn't do that. He sat there, listening intently, his brow furrowed. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then, he stood up, walked over to my duct-taped chair, and actually patted it. "So these guys," he said, his voice calm, "they're at Titan Corp, right? Big, fancy company." I nodded, confused by his reaction. "And they think our little app is a toy?" He continued. "Yeah, a school project," I mumbled. Liam actually smiled then, a small, knowing smile. "Good," he said. "That's actually really good, Alex." My jaw probably dropped. "Good? Are you serious? They just crushed my soul, Liam." He shrugged. "They don't get it. They can't see what we see. That's their weakness, not ours." Think about it. They're stuck in their corporate tower, thinking about enterprise solutions and global disruption. They've forgotten about the real people, the small businesses that make up the backbone of every community. That's where we come in. We're not building something for faceless corporations. We're building something for Mrs. Henderson's bakery, for Mr. Chen's hardware store, for the young artist trying to sell her paintings down the street. That's a real problem, Alex. A real need. His words hit me like a splash of cold water. He was right. My motivation wasn't about getting rich quick or competing with corporate giants. It was about solving a problem I deeply cared about. My mom used to run a tiny antique shop, and I remembered how hard it was for her to get the word out, to compete with big online retailers. My app was born from that experience, from seeing countless small businesses struggle. I had temporarily forgotten that, lost in the glitter of the tech world and the sting of their words. But how do we compete, Liam? I asked, still feeling overwhelmed. They have money, resources, connections. We have. Liam grinned. We have passion, we have a better idea. And we have each other. They laugh at our duct-taped chair. Fine. That chair represents our grit. It represents every late night, every cheap meal, every sacrifice we're willing to make for this dream. They're comfortable. They're complacent. We're hungry, Alex. And hunger beats comfort every single time. He paused, looking serious again. Look, this isn't going to be easy. We're going to work harder than we ever thought possible. We're going to fail a lot. We're going to have more ramen for dinner than we ever thought humanly possible. But if we truly believe in this, if we put in the work, we can make it happen. Not for them, but for us, and for all those small businesses that deserve a fighting chance. That conversation was the crucial turning point. Liam didn't just pick up the pieces. He helped me forge them into something stronger. He reminded me of my why. My product wasn't some abstract concept. It was about community, about supporting the local economy, about giving the little guy a voice. That deeply personal connection was something Mark and his buddies, with their focus on enterprise solutions, would never understand. From that day forward, the shame and despair were replaced by a focused, burning intensity. We practically lived at that co-working space. It was a dusty, cramped room with cheap coffee and even cheaper Wi-Fi, but it was ours. We'd show up before sunrise, usually after a few hours of sleep on uncomfortable couches, and work until late into the night. Our first big task was to rebuild the prototype. The version I showed at the networking event was frankly terrible. It crashed all the time, the user interface was clunky, and it barely had any features. Liam, a coding wizard, took the lead on the back end, meticulously cleaning up the code, making it stable, adding robust features. I focused on the front-end design, making it intuitive and visually appealing, and on the business development side, mapping out potential users, researching market needs, figuring out our monetization strategy. We lived on a shoestring budget. Ramen became a gourmet meal. Sometimes we'd split a cheap pizza. My landlord called me twice about late rent. Liam's parents thought he was crazy for turning down a well-paying internship at a big tech company to work on my hobby project. We both lost weight, our eyes were constantly red from staring at screens, and we probably smelled vaguely of stale coffee and desperation. Showers was sometimes a luxury, not a daily routine. We sacrificed everything. Weekends were for coding. Holidays were for brainstorming. Social lives, what were those? My old college friends would call, inviting me out, and I'd always decline, muttering some excuse about being busy. Truth was, I couldn't afford to go out, and every minute I spent not working on Ascend felt like a minute wasted. Every time I felt tired, every time I felt like giving up, the image of Mark's smearing face would flash in my mind, and a surge of renewed energy would course through me. I would prove them wrong. Not just for me, but for every dreamer, every small business owner, every person who had ever been laughed at for daring to try something different. There were so many setbacks. The app crashed again and again. Our initial user testing was a disaster. People found it confusing, clunky, and unnecessary. We'd spend weeks building a feature, only to realize nobody wanted it. Each failure was a punch to the gut, but we learned to absorb them, to analyze them, and to use them to make the app better. We iterated constantly, fueled by caffeine and a shared, silent determination. Liam and I would argue for hours about design choices or coding methods, but at the end of the day, we always agreed on the core mission. Slowly, painstakingly, the app started to take shape. It wasn't perfect, but it was becoming something real, something usable. We were building something from the ground up, with our own hands, sweat, and tears. There was a raw satisfaction in that, a feeling that no amount of corporate salary could buy. We knew deep down that we were building something truly special, something that could actually make a difference. And as the app improved, so did our confidence. We were still just two guys in a cramped room, but the fire inside us was burning brighter than ever. The grind was relentless, but then slowly, a tiny spark. Our first real breakthrough felt like hitting a jackpot after digging through mountains of dirt. We had finally polished the app enough for a soft launch. Picked a small neighborhood, a bustling area with lots of independent shops, and a strong community vibe. We personally visited every single store, explained our vision, and helped them set up their profiles on Ascend. Most were skeptical. Some were dismissive, but a few, just a handful, were willing to give us a shot. One of them was Mrs. Henderson, a sweet, elderly woman who ran a bakery called Sweet Surrender. Her croissants were legendary, but she struggled with online presence. We set up her profile, uploaded mouth-watering pictures of her pastries, and taught her how to post daily specials. Within a week, her sales saw a noticeable bump. People were discovering her bakery through Ascend, leaving glowing reviews. Mrs. Henderson, with tears in her eyes, hugged me fiercely. "You boys," she said, "you've given my little bakery a new life." That was our first true victory. That was worth more than any fancy investor meeting. Word started to spread within that small neighborhood. More shops signed up. More customers downloaded the app. Our user count was still in the hundreds, not thousands or millions, but it was growing organically. We were seeing real people, real businesses, truly benefiting from our work. That was the fuel that kept us going. Our first minor investment came from a local angel investor, a retired entrepreneur who used to own a chain of successful local cafes. He saw what we were trying to do, and more importantly, he saw the passion in our eyes. He gave us $50,000. It felt like $1 billion. We used it to rent a slightly larger office space, still modest, but no longer just a corner of my apartment. We bought better equipment, and for the first time, we actually paid ourselves a tiny, livable salary. No more ramen every single meal. We even celebrated with a moderately priced pizza. It was a huge step. But growth also brought its own set of challenges. As we expanded to more neighborhoods, scaling issues started to pop up. Our servers struggled under increased load. We needed more features, more customization options for businesses, and a better way to handle customer support. Legal hurdles became a headache. Privacy policies, terms of service, navigating local business regulations. We were engineers and dreamers, not lawyers. That's when Chloe entered the picture. We desperately needed someone with marketing and design sap. We posted a job ad, not expecting much, and she was one of the few applicants. Chloe was vibrant, creative, and had an uncanny knack for understanding what users really wanted. She had a background in graphic design and digital marketing, and she immediately saw the potential in Ascend. Her enthusiasm was infectious. During her interview, she pulled out a whole mock-up of how she envisioned the app's new interface. how she would brand Ascend, and even a detailed plan for social media campaigns. She had done her homework. She was also brutally honest. "Your current logo looks like it was designed in Microsoft Paint," she said with a cheeky grin. I had to admit, she wasn't wrong. We hired her on the spot, scraping together enough money to offer her a decent starting salary. Chloe immediately transformed our brand. She redesigned the logo, made the app interface cleaner and more intuitive, and launched a social media campaign that resonated deeply with local communities. She brought a fresh perspective, an understanding of how to communicate our mission to a wider audience. Our downloads surged. The three of us, Liam, Chloe, and I, formed an unlikely but powerful team. Liam, the quiet coding genius. Chloe, the charismatic marketing wizard. And me, the founder, the visionary. Fueled by a deep desire to prove the naysayers wrong, we spent countless hours together, arguing passionately, celebrating wildly, and commiserating during setbacks. We became more than just co-workers. We became a small, tight-knit family. There were still endless late nights, fueled by coffee and sheer willpower. There were still moments of doubt, when we wondered if we were truly building something sustainable. But whenever one of us felt that familiar wave of despair, the others were there to lift them up. We had a shared purpose, a shared dream, and a shared memory of that humiliating day that fueled our collective fire. One day I was walking past a cafe, lost in thought, when I nearly bumped into someone. It was Sarah, one of the Titan Corp employees who had mocked me. She was on her phone, laughing loudly at something, her blonde hair perfectly styled as always. She looked straight at me, her eyes passing over my face without a flicker of recognition. I was just another anonymous person on the street to her. I guess my appearance had changed significantly from the sweaty, nervous kid at the networking event. I was leaner, more focused, dressed a bit better, but still far from her corporate world. A strange mix of emotions washed over me, a tiny bit of satisfaction that she didn't recognize me, a flicker of the old anger, but mostly a quiet determination. She had no idea how far Ascend had come. She had no idea what was brewing just beneath the surface, and I wanted to keep it that way for now. Let them stay in their bubble, oblivious. Their time would come. We were still small, still an underdog, but we were growing slowly but surely like a tiny seed pushing through concrete. Every new user, every positive review, every new partner business was a small victory, a tiny step closer to our ultimate goal. We were building an undeniable force, brick by brick, fueled by the memory of a sneer. The years that followed were a blur of intense work, incremental victories, and a slow, undeniable ascent of Ascend innovations. We were no longer just two guys in a chair. We were a lean, efficient machine, growing slowly but steadily, always keeping our core mission in mind, helping local businesses thrive. Our user numbers climbed from hundreds to thousands, then tens of thousands. We expanded from a few neighborhoods to entire cities. Our product wasn't just an app anymore. It was a full platform, offering marketing tools, analytics, and even a simple point-of-sale system tailored for small merchants. We became known for our customer service, for truly listening to our users, and for building features that genuinely solve their problems. While bigger companies focused on flashy, often unnecessary tech, we focused on practical, impactful solutions. This approach was our unique value proposition. Titan Corp, meanwhile, was like a lumbering dinosaur. They were slow, bureaucratic, and completely out of touch with the evolving market. The software was expensive, clunky, and notorious for poor customer support. They relied on their established name and legacy contracts, but they weren't innovating. The biggest clients were starting to grumble, looking for alternatives. We heard whispers in the industry. Titan Corp was losing market share, bleeding talent, and their stock was starting to look shaky. It was a stark contrast to our agile, user-focused, and increasingly ethical approach. Key milestones started falling like dominoes. We hit 100,000 active users across multiple cities. That felt huge. It meant our model was truly scalable. We secured our Series A funding, a multi-million-dollar investment from a prominent venture capital firm that recognized our disruptive potential. This allowed us to hire more engineers, expand our sales team, and invest heavily in marketing. Our office was still modest compared to the gleaming towers of Titan Corp, but it was buzzing with energy, filled with brilliant, passionate people. But even with the successes, the sacrifices continued. My personal life was almost non-existent. I was always working, always thinking about Ascend. Sea was a luxury, and my diet mostly consisted of whatever I could grab quickly. Relationships suffered. My family worried about me, but the drive inside me was too strong to ignore. Every time I felt drained, I pictured Mark's face, heard his sneering laugh. It was a potent, if sometimes dark, motivation. I wasn't just building a company. I was building a monument to defiance. Liam was now our CTO, leading a team of brilliant engineers. Chloe was our head of marketing, crafting campaigns that truly resonated with our target audience. We had built a strong, dedicated team, a culture of innovation and collaboration. Everyone at Ascend knew our story, our humble beginnings, the struggles we had overcome. They knew the why behind what we did. It created a powerful sense of unity. The industry press started taking notice. Tech blogs that once dismissed us as a niche app were now writing glowing features about Ascend's innovative approach and rapid growth. We won awards for our customer satisfaction and community impact. We were no longer just an underdog. We were a rising star, a genuine threat to the established player. While we were soaring, Titan Corp seemed to be slowly sinking. Products were outdated, their customer base was dwindling, and nimble competitors were eating into their market share. They tried to innovate, but their massive corporate structure made them slow and ineffective. They couldn't adapt quickly enough. They were like a giant ship, trying to turn around in a small harbor. I still kept an eye on them, not out of malice, but out of a cold strategic interest. I subscribed to all the tech news alerts, especially those related to their business. I noticed more and more negative headlines. Titan Corp revenue declines for third straight quarter. Layoffs expected at Titan Corp amidst restructuring. Analysts questioned Titan Corp's future strategy. They were crumbling from within, losing their grip on the market they once dominated. The idea, vague at first, began to form in the back of my mind. It was a crazy thought, almost laughable given our humble beginning. But it lingered, growing stronger with each negative news story about Titan Corp, and each positive one about Ascend. What if? What if we could actually do it? What if we could not just compete with them, but actually excel them? Impossible. It sounded insane. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't just about revenge. It was about opportunity. Titan Corp had valuable assets, patents, a large customer database, even if they were unhappy, and a vast network of infrastructure. If we could acquire them, we could integrate their valuable parts into Ascend, discard the dead weight, and truly revolutionize the enterprise software space with our agile, user-focused approach. It wasn't just about proving Mark and his friends wrong. It was about building something even bigger, something that could genuinely change the industry. The idea was audacious, but it was no longer just a whisper. It was a growing raw, and I knew I had to explore it. The grind had transformed us from a struggling startup into a formidable force, and the stage was being set for the ultimate showdown. The whispers began subtly, almost imperceptibly, before growing into a thunderous roar. Titan Corp was in deep trouble. I had been following their decline for years, a morbid curiosity mixed with a strategic interest. Their stock price had plummeted. Their latest product launch was a spectacular failure, and a major scandal involving data breaches had just hit the news, wiping billions off their market value. They were bleeding money, losing clients, and their management was in utter disarray. At the same time, Ascend Innovations was flying high. We had just closed our Series B funding round, raising over $100 million. We had cemented our position as the leading platform for local businesses, and our unique approach to community-driven tech was gaining significant traction. We were disrupting markets that Titan Corp had long ignored or failed to adapt to. Then the unexpected opportunity arose. Not initially Titan Corp, but a smaller, struggling competitor called Synergy Solutions. Synergy had a decent patent portfolio and a few key enterprise clients that could complement Ascend's offerings. Titan Corp was also rumored to be eyeing Synergy for a fire sale acquisition, hoping to salvage some market share and a quick win. My investment bankers came to me with the Synergy opportunity. "It's a strategic fit, Alex," they said. "Good price, quick integration," I agreed. We moved fast, aggressively, and cleanly. Within weeks, we had outmaneuvered Titan Corp, acquiring Synergy Solutions for a very favorable price. It was a major win for Ascend, boosting our profile and giving us access to a new segment of the market. It was a clear signal to the industry. Ascend Innovations was no longer just a startup. We were a serious player, capable of making big moves. The news of Ascend's acquisition of Synergy sent ripples through the tech world. It was discussed on business news channels, in industry journals. People were starting to wonder, who is this Ascend Innovations? Where did they come from? The irony wasn't lost on me. 5 years ago, I was a joke. Now we were making headlines. It was during the Synergy integration that I truly started to consider the unthinkable. If we could acquire Synergy, why not Titan Corp? They were a much larger beast, but they were also gravely wounded. Their assets, their customer base, their infrastructure, despite their mismanagement, they still held significant value. I brought the idea to Liam and Chloe. We were in our expanded conference room, still modest, but functional. I laid out the financials, the strategic rationale, the risks, and the potential rewards. Liam, ever the cautious pragmatist, leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed. "Alex, are you serious? Titan Corp? They're huge. A dinosaur maybe, but a very large dinosaur. This would be massive and incredibly risky." Chloe, on the other hand, was instantly alight with excitement. "Are you kidding? This is brilliant. Imagine the headlines. Underdog startup swallows beleaguered giant. It's a marketing dream, Alex. And think of the impact we could have, bringing our user-centric philosophy to their legacy clients." I knew their reactions were typical of their personalities. Liam saw the technical and financial challenges. Chloe saw the vision and the narrative. My own feelings were a complex mix. It wasn't just a business decision anymore. It was personal. That sting from 5 years ago, the memory of Mark's sneer, was still a raw nerve. But I tried to push that aside, to focus on the objective benefits. This wasn't about revenge, I told myself. It was about building something truly great. "We need to be smart about this," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "It would be an all-cash offer, or a significant part cash, part stock. We'd need more investors, bridge loans. It's an aggressive move, but the timing is right. They're vulnerable. And their core products, despite being outdated, still serve a fundamental need. We could modernize them, integrate them with our platform, bring them into the 21st century. We started the initial, covert steps towards due diligence. We hired a new team of financial analysts and M&A experts, keeping them on a need-to-know basis. They began digging into Titan Corp's books, analyzing their assets, their liabilities, their customer contracts. The deeper we dug, the more cracks we found. Titan Corp was even more mismanaged than we thought. But beneath the layers of mismanagement, there were still valuable assets, buried like treasure. The whispers grew louder. Now, not just about Titan Corp's woes, but about a potential hostile takeover. Analysts speculated about which company might make a move. Names of other tech giants were thrown around. Nobody, not even in their wildest dreams, mentioned Ascend Innovations. We were still seen as the plucky underdog, the niche player. That suited me just fine. The element of surprise was a powerful weapon. I met with our lead investors from the Series B round. They were seasoned veterans, tough but shrewd. I laid out the Titan Corp acquisition plan. They listened, initially skeptical, then slowly their eyes widened. They saw the opportunity, the potential for a massive return. They agreed to support us, to help us secure the necessary financing. It was going to be a monumental effort, stretching us to our absolute limits, but they believed we could pull it off. The emotional weight of it all was immense. Every time I saw a news report about Titan Corp's struggles, a small part of me felt a cold satisfaction. But I knew I couldn't let that be my primary motivation. This had to be a sound business decision, not just a personal vendetta. I spent hours alone, wrestling with my emotions, trying to keep them separate from the strategic planning. I imagined the look on Mark's face, on Sarah's, on David's when they found out. Would they still be at Titan Corp? Most likely. Big companies like that had a way of keeping mediocre people in place. The thought was intoxicating, but I pushed it down. Focus, Alex. Focus on the numbers. Focus on the integration plan. Focus on the future of Ascend. The past would take care of itself. The stage was set, the pieces were moving. And the corporate giant that had once laughed at me was now teetering on the brink, unknowingly about to fall into my hands. The decision was made. The financing was secured, a complex web of loans, equity, and strategic partnerships that pushed Ascend Innovations to its financial limits. It was a gamble, the biggest of my life, but I believed in it with every fiber of my being. On a cold Tuesday morning, our legal team formally delivered the acquisition offer to Titan Corp's board of directors. The offer was generous enough to be tempting, especially given their precarious financial state, but also structured in a way that Ascend would gain control swiftly. The market reacted almost immediately. Rumors had been swirling for weeks, but when Ascend Innovations, a company half their age and a fraction of their historical size, officially made a bid for Titan Corp, the entire tech world stopped. One screamed, "Ascend Innovations make shock. Bid for ailing Titan Corp. Underdog startup. Aims to acquire legacy giant." Analysts were either calling it genius or insanity. Our stock price surged on the news, buoyed by the audacity and the potential. Titan Corp stock also saw a temporary bump, purely due to the acquisition offer, but the internal chaos within their company was palpable. From the inside, Titan Corp was in turmoil. Their employees, already demoralized by years of decline and recent layoffs, were in a state of shock. They were buzzing with questions. Who was Ascend Innovations? Were they a hostile buyer? Would there be more layoffs? What would happen to their jobs, their benefits, their entire corporate culture? Most scrambling, holding emergency meetings, trying to figure out if they should fight the acquisition or accept the lifeline. Meanwhile, at Ascend, we were a whirlwind of focused activity. Liam and his team were already mapping out potential integration plans, identifying which of Titan Corp's technologies could be salvaged and improved. Chloe was working overtime with her marketing team, crafting the public narrative, ready to present Ascend as the savior, not the destroyer of Titan Corp. Our plan was to integrate their valuable assets, streamline their operations, and infuse their stale corporate culture with Ascend's innovative, user-focused spirit. And then there were them: Mark, Sarah, David, my former tormentors. I kept tabs on their career paths mostly out of curiosity. To my not-so-surprise, they were all still at Titan Corp. Mark had risen to a mid-level management position, still seemingly as smug as ever, from what I could gather on LinkedIn. Sarah was in marketing, David in product development. They were part of the very fabric of the company I was about to acquire. I wondered what they thought of Ascend Innovations now. Had they even made the connection? Did they remember the kid they had mocked at that networking event 5 years ago? Probably not. To them, I was just a nameless face in a crowd, a fleeting moment of amusement. They probably assumed the Tory startup had long since folded. The thought brought a grim smile to my face. Their social media posts, which I followed with a secondary anonymous account, were full of anxiety and speculation about the takeover. They were worried about their jobs, about their future. They were blaming market forces and the economy for Titan Corp's decline, never acknowledging their own complacency or their company's outdated practices. They certainly weren't blaming themselves. My team advised me to remain somewhat anonymous, as the primary face of Ascend during the public negotiation. We wanted to convey confidence and competence, not a personal vendetta. So I mostly stayed behind the scenes, letting our spokespeople handle the press conferences and official statements. This also meant that Mark, Sarah, and David wouldn't immediately realize their new boss was the kid they'd laughed at. The surprise, I knew, would be even more potent. The tension built over the next few weeks. Titan Corp's board was split. Some wanted to fight, to maintain independence, despite the clear writing on the wall. Others, more pragmatic, saw Ascend's offer as their only way out, a chance to save what was left of the company and their own reputations. The internal politics were a mess, a corporate soap opera playing out behind closed doors. I received daily updates, sometimes hourly. The negotiations were fierce, with lawyers and bankers working around the clock. Every clause, every line of the contract was scrutinized. There were moments when I thought the deal might collapse, when the sheer complexity of it seemed insurmountable. But I pushed through, driven by that same stubborn resolve that had pulled me through the early days of Ascend. I thought of Liam, coding tirelessly. I thought of Chloe, crafting our message with such care. I thought of Mrs. Henderson, her bakery saved. And yes, I thought of Mark's face. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the word came down. Titan Corp's board had voted to accept Ascend Innovations' offer. The deal was done, the acquisition was finalized. Public announcement would be made at the start of the next business day. I stood in my office, looking out at the city lights, the skyline dotted with countless buildings, including the imposing one that housed Titan Corp. It was surreal, from a duct-taped chair to owning a major tech company. It felt like a dream, but it was real. And tomorrow the world, and more importantly, Mark, Sarah, and David would finally know. The next morning the news exploded. Ascend Innovations completes acquisition of Titan Corp. The headlines were everywhere, plastered across every major financial news outlet, trending on social media. The tech world was stunned. The underdog had not only won, it had swallowed the giant whole. At Titan Corp, the announcement created a seismic shockwave. Employees huddled around screens, reading the news, their faces a mix of disbelief, fear, and reluctant awe. Ascend Innovations, a name many had only recently heard, was now their parent company. I remember that morning vividly. I chose to arrive a little late, letting the news sink in, letting the initial chaos settle. My team was buzzing with nervous excitement. Liam kept giving me high fives, grinning broadly. Chloe was already planning the integration announcements and new branding. At precisely 10 a.m., I walked into the lobby of Titan Corp's headquarters. It was a building I had only ever seen from the outside, a symbol of everything I felt I wasn't, everything they thought I couldn't be. The marble floors gleamed. The security guards were impeccably dressed, and the reception desk looked like something out of a futuristic movie. It was exactly as I remembered it from the day I pitched them, only now it was mine. My small team followed me. Liam, Chloe, our lead HR executive, and our head of legal. We were dressed professionally, but with the distinct, slightly more casual style of a Silicon Valley tech company. No stuffy suits for us. As we rode the elevator up to the executive floor, my heart pounded. This wasn't just a business acquisition. This was the culmination of years of relentless work, of every sacrifice, of every insult that had been hurled my way. This was personal. But I composed myself. I had to be professional, firm, and in control. The executive floor was a maze of hushed offices and glass-walled conference rooms. We were led to the main boardroom, where the remaining members of Titan Corp's executive team were waiting. As I stepped through the double doors, the room fell silent, and there they were, Mark, Sarah, David. They were seated around the massive mahogany table, their faces pale and drawn. They looked exhausted, likely from days of frantic internal meetings and worrying about their jobs. They looked up as I entered, their eyes scanning my face looking for their new boss. Nark, the main bully, was sitting closest to the head of the table. He was still wearing an expensive suit, but it looked a bit rumpled, like he'd slept in it. Sarah was beside him, her hair not quite as perfect as I remembered. David was across the table, fiddling nervously with a pen. My eyes met Mark's first. He looked at me, a polite, almost expectant look on his face. He clearly didn't recognize me, not yet. He was probably expecting some grizzled tech mogul, someone he could try to impress, someone he could schmooze. I walked to the head of the table, slowly, deliberate. Liam and Chloe took seats behind me. I stood there for a moment, taking in the room, taking in their faces. My voice was calm, steady, betraying none of the emotion swirling inside me. "Good morning," I said, my voice resonating in the quiet room. "I am Alex, CEO of Ascend Innovations." And that was when it happened. Mark's eyes, which had been politely scanning my face, suddenly widened. His jaw dropped. The color drained from his face, leaving him ashen. His eyes darted from my face to Liam, then to Chloe, then back to me, a flicker of frantic recognition finally igniting behind them. He remembered. He remembered the sweaty kid in the cheap shirt, the one with the toy app. Sarah, who had been trying to project a confident, professional demeanor, let out a small, strangled gasp. Her eyes glazed over with shock, then a dawning horror. She probably remembered her fake cough laugh. David, the condescending one, dropped his pen with a clatter. He recoiled slightly in his chair, as if I were a ghost. His smirk was completely gone, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated terror. The silence in the room stretched, thick and heavy. It wasn't just silence, it was the sound of 3 worlds collapsing. Their faces told the story. They realized, they understood. The kid they had mocked, the toy startup they had dismissed, had just bought their entire company. Their entire professional lives, their comfortable existence, was now in the hands of the person they had so carelessly ridiculed. It was more satisfying than I could have ever imagined. No angry outburst, no dramatic monologue from me. Just my presence, just my name, just the look on their faces. It was the quietest, most devastating victory I could have ever wished for. And the meeting hadn't even truly begun. The initial shock in the room was almost comical, if it hadn't been so deeply satisfying. Mark, Sarah, and David looked like they'd seen a ghost. The other Titan Corp executives who weren't privy to my past humiliation merely looked confused by the trio's extreme reaction. It was a fleeting moment, but I savored it. I cleared my throat, forcing myself to push down the surge of triumph. This wasn't the time for gloating. This was the time to set a new tone, to show them that while I remembered, I was also a professional. As I was saying, I began, my voice steady. I am Alex, and I am here to talk about the future. I didn't acknowledge their stunned faces directly, but I certainly didn't look away from them either. Today marks a new chapter for both Ascend Innovations and Titan Corp. We understand this is a significant change, and change can be unsettling. But I want to assure you that our goal is not to dismantle but to build. I then launched into my prepared remarks, outlining our vision for the combined company. I spoke about integration, about leveraging Titan Corp's legacy, patents and client base, and infusing it with Ascend's agility, innovation, and user-centric philosophy. I emphasized that we were focused on growth, on creating new opportunities, and on becoming a powerhouse in the enterprise software space. I talked about combining the best of both worlds. Throughout my speech, I could feel Mark, Sarah, and David's eyes on me. Their initial shock had given way to a nervous, almost desperate attempt to appear calm and professional. Mike kept adjusting his tie, his gaze flickering between me and the table. Sarah tried to take notes, but her hand was shaking. David, who had looked so smug at our first meeting, now looked like a deer caught in headlights. When I finished, I opened the floor for questions. The other Titan Corp executives asked the usual questions about restructuring, benefits, and timelines. I answered them clearly, confident. Then Mark, after a visible struggle, raised a trembling hand. "Mr. Alex," he began, his voice a little too loud, a little too forced. He couldn't even bring himself to use my full name. It's quite a surprise to see you here. I mean, Ascend Innovations. Your company has grown tremendously. I vaguely recall, seeing you at a networking event some years ago. It's truly remarkable what you've achieved. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a pathetic attempt to gloss over their past behavior, to pretend he was simply acknowledging a new competitor, not someone he had personally ridiculed. I met his gaze, letting a small knowing smile play on my lips. "Yes, Mark, it was quite a memorable event for me as well," I said. My voice calm, but with an edge he surely understood. "A lot has certainly changed since then. Back then you seemed to have a rather limited view of what Ascend Innovations could achieve. You called my product a toy, if I recall correctly, a school project." The blood drained from Mark's face again. Sarah actually winced beside him. David looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. I continued, my voice unwavering. I hope you now have a clearer understanding of our vision and the kind of impact we aim to have." It wasn't a rant, it wasn't shout. It was just a calm, direct statement of fact, delivered with the full weight of my new position. "It was enough," Mark stammered, unable to form a coherent reply. "Well, yes, certainly. Perceptions change, markets evolve, we all learn," he trailed off. I moved on to other questions, but the message had been delivered. I remembered, and they knew I remembered. Over the next few weeks, as the integration process began, the fate of Mark, Sarah, and David became clear. I wasn't going to fire them just for past insults. That wasn't my style, and it would look unprofessional. But neither was I going to forget. My HR team and I carefully reviewed their performance records at Titan Corp. Unsurprisingly, they weren't exactly stellar. They were mediocre, complacent, and their team's outputs were consistently subpar. Mark, despite his title, had been coasting for years. His projects were behind schedule, and he had a reputation for taking credit for his subordinates' work. Sarah's marketing campaigns were uninspired, and she often clashed with creative teams. David's product development was slow, buggy, and not innovative. They were symptomatic of Titan Corp's broader problems: a culture of mediocrity and a lack of true passion. During the restructuring, many positions at Titan Corp were naturally made redundant as we streamlined operations and eliminated overlapping roles. Mark's entire department was reorganized, and his specific role was eliminated. He was offered a severance package, a generous one for a legacy company, but a clear sign that his future was not with the new Ascent Titan Corp entity. He tried to appeal, to meet with me, to explain his past actions, but I politely declined. My HR team handled it. He left with a golden handshake, but without a job, and knowing exactly why. Sarah and David faced similar fates. The departments were folded into Ascend's more efficient structures. Their skills, while once considered adequate at Titan Corp, simply weren't up to the standard of Ascend's dynamic, results-driven teams. They were offered lower-level positions, requiring them to report to people much younger than themselves. People who had started at Ascend at entry-level positions and risen through the ranks. They could either accept or take a severance package. David reluctantly took the severance, his pride too great to work under someone he perceived as beneath him. Sarah surprisingly took the demotion, clinging to the stability, but I saw the defeat in her eyes every time I walked past her new, smaller cube. The message was clear. Mediocrity, arrogance, and complacency had no place in the new company. It wasn't about revenge in the sense of public humiliation or financial ruin. It was about consequence. It was about showing that hard work, passion, and genuine belief in your mission ultimately triumph over arrogance and stagnation. Their hearts were certainly broken, not by malice, but by the relentless march of progress they had so foolishly dismissed. Months passed quickly, and the integration of Titan Corp into Ascend Innovations was well underway. It was a monumental task, but my team, bolstered by the best of Titan Corp's talent we had retained, was executing it flawlessly. The old, clunky Titan Corp systems were being replaced by Ascend's agile, cloud-based solution. Their extensive client base, once frustrated and neglected, was now experiencing Ascend's legendary customer service and innovative features. Cultural shift was perhaps the most challenging, but also the most rewarding part. We introduced Ascend's open communication, flat hierarchy, and emphasis on creativity and user feedback. The stuffy corporate atmosphere of Titan Corp slowly began to dissipate, replaced by a vibrant energy that hummed through the hallways. Employees who had been stifled under the old regime found new life, new purpose. Many embraced the change, excited by the opportunity to work for a company that truly valued innovation and progress. Mark was gone, as was David. I heard through the grapevine that Mark was struggling to find a new high-level position, his reputation tainted by Titan Corp's collapse, and his own lackluster performance. David had started some small, uninspired consulting firm, a far cry from the big corporate life he once enjoyed. Sarah, surprisingly, was still at the company, now working under a much younger manager who had started as an intern at Ascend. I sometimes saw her in the hallways. She never made eye contact. Her face was always devoid of the smugness I remembered, replaced by a quiet, almost defeated resignation. No grand firings, no public shaming. Just the quiet, relentless consequences of their own choices, and the undeniable force of progress. Their irrelevance was their true punishment. I stood in what used to be the CEO's grand office at Titan Corp. It was now my office. The views were spectacular, overlooking the entire city. I had kept some of the original furniture, a nod to the past, but the walls were now adorned with Ascend's vibrant branding and photos of our early team, our humble co-working space, Mrs. Henderson's bakery. A small, framed photo of my duct-taped chair sat on my desk, a permanent reminder of where I came from. I picked it up, running my thumb over the image. I remembered the humiliation, the anger, the despair. But no, those feelings were distant, replaced by a profound sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just about proving them wrong anymore. It was about building something meaningful, something that helped people, something that truly innovated. The revenge was merely a byproduct, a satisfying side note to a much grander story. Liam walked in, a stack of technical reports in his hand. He was still the quiet, brilliant coder, but now he carried himself with the confidence of a seasoned CTO. "Alex, good news," he said. "Our latest numbers show our integration strategy for the enterprise clients is exceeding expectations. Customer satisfaction is up across the board." I smiled. "That's fantastic, Liam. It's all thanks to the team and to you." Chloe entered next, vibrant as ever, her tablet in hand. "And the media can't stop talking about our turnaround story. They're calling us the model for how legacy companies should innovate." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of pride. This wasn't just my victory. It was theirs too. It was the victory of every person who believed in Ascend, when it was just a crazy idea. I looked out the window at the sprawling city below. Ascend Innovations, once a whispered dream born in a cramped apartment, now stood tall, a beacon of innovation and resilience. It was an empire, built not on arrogance or dismissal, but on hard work, dedication, and a stubborn refusal to give up. Core of Ascend's mission, helping the little guy, still resonated deeply within every decision we made. The heartbreaking for Mark, Sarah, and David was simply them witnessing their own professional demise, not by my direct hand, but by the natural course of progress that they had ridiculed. The satisfaction for me wasn't in their suffering, but in the affirmation of my own unwavering belief. They had tried to extinguish my fire, but all they did was make it burn brighter, and in the end, that fire consumed their entire world. I looked at the duct-taped chair in the photo, then back at the city, at the company I had built. The journey had been long, brutal, and filled with doubt. But standing here, at the pinnacle of what I had dared to dream, I knew every single step had been worth it.